Queen of Queens. Written by Jojo and read by Thornquill.
I awoke. For the first moment, the only sensation was the cold. I raised a hoof. A fleshy wall stood in its path. I pressed another hoof against it. My prison pulsed and throbbed. I opened my mouth. A sour, gooey substance filled my lungs. I put my fangs to the soft wall. With one bite, I pierced through. I heard the cocoon break. With a push, it split in two. I tumbled into freedom. I coughed and sneezed to expel the foul half-liquid that filled every crevice of my body. I tasted air for the first time. My shaking legs lifted me. My back stretched itself with a crack. My neck, until now contorted, straightened itself. The voices congratulated me. I opened my eyes. The room was large and empty. No. Not empty, merely dark. My slit pupils dilated. Behind me, the chrysalis had already shriveled and shrunken. The last drops of the green slime evaporated before my eyes. Although there was no one to greet me, the voices assured me that I was not alone. The stone floor was a map of the world, and I stood at the center. For I was the divine queen of our kind, beauty incarnate. The walls were lined by statues that looked like me, tall and slender creatures with flowing manes and imposing horns. Their emerald-studded eyes looked down on me, for I was the divine queen of our kind, but many have come before me, and countless more would follow. The ceiling was crafted in a dragon's image, whose imposing stone jaws seemed ready to lock around my neck, for I was the divine queen of our kind, and my life was the most fragile of them all. The voices urged me to go on. Where am I? I was inside the halls of remembrance, in the foothills of greenest plains. A terrace looked out into the world, beckoning me. Outside, I saw a black sky illuminated by innumerable tiny sparks of light. I had awoken at night. I knew this, although inside the cocoon time had no meaning. The fields below were not bare. Thousands upon thousands of glowing eyes looked up at me. These creatures were of my kind, but they were not like me. They were short, stubby, bald. Beauty such as mine would forever remain a dream to them. Their gazes outshone the stars. Our kind gathered here to witness the rise of the new queen. Their eyes glowed on the farthest of mountaintops, all turned my way. One pair of eyes was missing. I knew this, although I could not possibly count them all. He would be my personal consort. In these moments, he was in the Spire of Ancients. What is the Spire of Ancients? To the west, past the Sea of Eyes, stood a tower that dwarfed the mountains. In there lay the remains of every queen who came before, and in there would I rest. The ashes of my mother were in the hooves of her consort, and who would be mine? That is why I could not yet hear my mother's voice. Through millennia, my kind had changed more than any being could fathom. Queens rose and cultures fell, but the Spire of Ancients remained untouched. I knew this, although my life had only just begun. Of the spire's architects, I knew nothing. Of the first queen to be put to rest there, the voices were silent. Time had faded every legend and obscured the last myth. Perhaps the spire was older even than time. I looked down again at my kind into their anticipating eyes. They had wings, yet they chose to remain on the ground, uncomfortable, distant, and far below. For I was their beloved queen, infinitely their greater, their most humble servant. The magnitude of responsibility weighed down on my shoulders, and it planted stones in my stomach. For the first time, my heart beat rapidly. My personal consort insisted to be called, in full, the greatest consort to our beloved queen and her teacher, mentor, servant, and he who will carry her ashes and the ashes of her daughters. I didn't use his name much. At sunrise, he came to see me. By sundown, we were on a journey through the lands of our kind.
The most important thing,
He began,
is to remain calm. It will all come to you. It is only a matter of time.
We were inside a mountain, hollowed out in its entirety. Our kind called it the library. My consort boasted it held a copy of every book ever written with multiples to spare.
Is it not beautiful?
He asked. The bowels of the mountain resonated with the swarm inside. Some of our kind hung from the ceiling, open books in their hooves. Others adhered to the walls and leapt from shelf to shelf in search of their next reading. Yet others sat above half-empty tomes, quills hovering beside them, suspended in green light. No matter whom we passed, without exception, they dropped to the ground and bowed. I enjoyed that. Their adoration radiated piquant energies. My consort cleared his throat.
Are you perhaps too taken by the sight to respond, our beloved queen who brings joy and hope to our kind under the treacherous sky the third?
I sighed in defeat. You were supposed to shut up. I was wondering if you'd catch on.
My apologies,
He said.
It is my duty to ensure that you are on schedule.
I didn't bother to respond. Credit where it's due, he remained mostly quiet afterwards, speaking only to guide me in one direction or another. He led me down a chasm where the noise of the upper library did not penetrate the stone. Our destination was a study of some kind. A few bookshelves stood by the walls. 5 of our kind sat in a circle with one empty book in the center and one quill above it. Their eyes were wide and stared blankly forward. My consort stomped. One of our kind blinked, and the quill fell. The others blinked in unison, rubbing their eyes. They turned to me, and within a second they fell to their knees.
It is my honor,
The first to blink said, rising. The rest of them stayed down.
I apologize for my failure to notice your presence. I was instructing my pupils, all in service to you, our beloved queen who brings joy and hope to our kind under the treacherous sky the third.
Who are you? I asked.
I am whose words made statues cry, scholar and historian.
He turned to my consort.
Here for the books, yes?
A shelf-long line of books lit up in green and floated over to us.
As always.
My consort replied, his magic taking over the stack of books. One of them came to float before my eyes, showing its cover.
These contain the detailed history of our kind.
I glanced over to the rest. There had to be at least a dozen more, each as thick as my head. Am I to read this all?
No,
My consort said.
you will find that the more you read, the more you will remember.
A tidal wave of thoughts washed over my mind. They were not my own. You've done this before.
I see to it that every new queen remembers her heritage.
On that note,
The historian added.
I would appreciate it if you brought these back. I would hate to write it all again. Thousands of years of memories, right there.
Well then,
My consort said.
we have a long way ahead of us. It would be best not to dawdle. As you were, whose words made statues cry.
It was my honor.
He replied. My consort led the way upwards, the books following us in green light. He didn't speak. A quick learner. I liked that. As we were passing through the titanic gates of the mountain library, we met a new arrival. Seeing us, he let out a confused hiss. His legs seemed to freeze on the spot. I expected him to step out of my way. He stood still even as my chest plate touched his muzzle. I looked down. He looked up. The pathetic thing didn't reach half my height. He shook, his eyes twitched, and his mouth made indistinct mumbles. I touched my nose to his. Get on your knees and bow. With a scared yelp, he slammed his face into the ground. Behind me, my consort chuckled. What's so funny? I asked.
How times change.
He chortled. He took a breath, composing himself.
This is whose hooves mold clay and stone, and his love for our beloved queens has been unparalleled for centuries. He greeted your mother, once our beloved queen, may she rest among the stars, much the same way.
Did he now? I looked down at the thing cowering beneath me. His lips were dangerously close to my hooves. Don't touch me!
Your mother, once our beloved queen, may she rest among the stars, embraced him. Perhaps he expected similar from you.
I cocked my head. Are you judging me? My consort raised his hooves in protest.
I would never dream of it. Nothing fills my heart with more joy than seeing our beloved queens grow over the generations.
Oh,
The one at my hooves sighed.
how may I serve you, our beloved queen who brings joy and hope?
I planted a hoof on his nose, pressing his mouth shut. What can you do? Impress me. Touching him, I sensed the intensity of his feelings. He loved me more than anything, yet at the same time he was terrified. The medley of emotions tingled my back tenderly. I lifted my hoof, and he rose slowly. He trembled, he huffed, he mumbled, and then shot into the sky, flying away without another word. I continued walking. They're not all like this, are they?
No,
My consort replied.
this one is special. Make no mistake, however, for we all love you. Without the queens, our kind would be lost to inadequacy.
Out of the mountain, he looked up at the starry sky.
Do you require rest? We have a long journey ahead.
The flight from the halls of remembrance to the library had been a long one. Yes, I do, in fact. My consort took me to a vast plain under the mountain. I lay down, stretching my tired legs and letting my wings rest. The grass bed was a beautiful deep green, and softer to the touch than the finest silk. My mother's work. Thoughts filled my mind again, making me grasp at my head. My consort set the stack of books down.
Are you well?
He asked.
I am here to answer any questions you might have.
The consorts helped bridge the gap between the generations. I knew this. How? I took a moment to calm down. These pastures are my mother's creation. You served her, and my grandmother, and the one before her. And there used to be a rocky canyon here, and... My words choked on a painful hiss. My head was splitting.
Remain calm.
My consort said.
You're remembering the thoughts and feelings of the queens who came before. I am here to help you enact order on that chaos. It is perfectly natural, our beloved queen who brings...
Stop it, I said. Why do you do this? He blinked obtusely.
You are in pain. I can feel it. It is my sworn duty to help you process the memories.
No, the titles. Why do you insist on these long titles? He looked surprised.
Because it is your name. Do you not remember? I would never dream of disrespecting you.
I slammed a hoof at the grass. Well, stop it. Pain pierced my head again. No. Hold on. I put a hoof to my forehead. They whispered again. It is because you live forever. My consort smiled proudly.
You are correct. We are our names. Or perhaps our names are what we think is worth remembering about us.
You are all immortal, I continued. But I only live 20 years. Hearing my own words, the horror of my condition dawned on me. Queens only live 20 years.
It is true. Your time is running out. Our beloved queens possess a drive that the rest of us cannot begin to imagine. You are the heralds of change.
That's why we're important, I said with a newfound understanding. Without us, you wouldn't know what to do with your eternal lives. Suddenly, I pitied them. How empty their lives must be to devote their existence to beings such as me. Let this be my first change, then. I refuse to waste time with your full name, consort. He put up a hoof in objection, but one glare silenced him. And you will call me your beloved queen, and no more. For a moment he looked surprised. Frightened, maybe. Then a smile overtook his lips.
That is new, our beloved queen who... Our beloved queen. That is different.
Different is what you love. He tilted his head a little, smiling.
It is indeed.
I put my head onto my mother's grass. Consort understood and lay down as well. Out in the open plain, I felt uneasy at first. But with the queens watching over me in the sky, I had nothing to fear. The lands of our kind existed for me, and were mine to toy with as I pleased. For the first time, I fell asleep. Distant songs and prayers that spoke of my glory carried me to my dreams. The next day dawned. A cold shiver woke me. I opened my eyes. My mother's grass was gone, replaced by a tiled marble floor. Massive walls surrounded me, and above, a glistening ceiling of glass and diamonds. I shook Consort awake. Consort! Consort! Where are we? Consort lifted his head, as bewildered as I was. Then a grin crept up his lips.
He never ceases to amaze me.
He stood up and offered a helping hoof.
Let us have a look around, shall we?
A cathedral had been erected around us overnight. Baroque spires loomed over great Rococo halls, twisting, curved shapes covered by the finest gold-gilded marquetry. We scaled staircases whose walls were paintings and walked through rooms scented by roses. We found no one to greet us, yet the cathedral seemed to guide us. One room opened elegantly into the next, new colors and shapes begging to be seen. In the end, we emerged on a balcony overlooking the green plain. There sat whose hooves mold clay and stone, eagerly bowing before me. Down in the fields, hundreds more of our kind bowed as well. Did you do this? I asked. He didn't rise.
I had to call on my apprentices to finish in time.
I glanced back at the monumental structure. I hadn't seen half of it. Putting a hoof on the architect's cheek, I made him rise. "Most impressive," I said. "I am pleased." He snuggled his cheek against my hoof, smiling, all but melting at my touch. The anxiety I had felt in him had vanished, replaced by unadulterated adoration. I couldn't help but smile. For this was our kind. A race of artisans and philosophers, of poets and singers, of explorers, writers, creators, all out of love for me. The lands of our kind were vast, and there was much to see. Our journey was near on a year long, and Consort brought before me many more of our kind. The first to sail the eastern seas claimed to have been born over 5 millennia ago. He who tames dragons was more humble, putting his age in the low hundreds. The bringer of light in our kind's darkest hour said he was exactly 1,000 years old. The architect of the Chapel of Tears for the Lost refused to see me, citing the destruction of his greatest creation at the hooves of a queen. He had been hurt in the past, Consort explained, and had not created anything since. His home was Cenotaph, city of empty graves. Consort explained that there had been a war between our kind and another, one that we lost, and casualties were many. Cenotaph had been erected not at a queen's behest, but by the broodmates and friends of those who perished. There they lived, but a few hundred of them, in isolation and in defiance of the queens. As they were but an irrelevant fraction, no queen had bothered with them. I had no intention of begging fools back. Their blasphemous hatred was delicious enough. Lesser kinds needed to feast on the flesh of others. They dug their hooves and paws into the earth to devour what grew in the dirt. Our kind needed not condescend to feed on the foul substances of the world. Love, hate, jealousy, friendship, emotions quenched our appetite. Catharsis, caused or lived, was our sustenance. To live, we needed to create new things. We had to grow. We had to change. We toppled statues to erect monuments even greater. Palaces were run into the ground in favor of temples far more grandiose. Some of our kind swore that the simplest of things were the most beautiful of them all. Others retorted with complexities that took 100 conjoined minds to understand. Perfection was our goal, for perfection needs no change. If we created the perfect piece of art, there would be no more need for art. Perfection would sustain our kind forever. The forest of giants clung to the southern mountains, spreading out across 3.5 pinnacles and valleys. From the roots that tore into rock, it took a full minute of flight to come above the foliage. There, Consort and I perched on a leaf. It did not bend under our weight, and we had room to spare. Consort emptied his bag, throwing onto the leaf several scrolls, books, and a large curled-up leather sheet.
Our beloved queen, it is time you began remembering the lands outside.
He unfurled the sheet, revealing a map color-painted in excruciating detail. The map depicted all kinds of creatures in their respective lands. Their enchanted ink slid along the leather, bringing the figures to life. Every inch had a story to tell. Ink creatures prayed to their gods in temples and waged wars on their enemies. The world was in constant change, and change was beautiful. That's what the voices told me. The ascension to the leaf had tired me. Looking at the map was enough to renew my strength. Consort puffed his chest proudly. His carapace shimmered in the afternoon light.
I have found the beginning of the second year ideal to start studying the world at large. Worry not. I have refined my methods through many generations.
On that piece of leather, the entirety of our history was summed up. Or what we remembered of it. Just as the ink creatures lived and died, so did seas and oceans dry up between great land masses. Rivers flowed, conjoined, and broke apart. Mountains were born to live brief moments before the earth swallowed them again. The rest of my kind experienced the change's first hoof. I would only see an immeasurable fraction of eternity. Death wasn't what scared me. Oblivion was. Was this all that would remain of me? A picture on a dead animal's skin? Words on a page? I couldn't look up from the map. Was she a good queen? My mother? Consort tilted his head.
I'm sorry?
What do you remember? What can you tell me about her? Once again he smiled. He did that a lot. It grew on me, over time. Clearly I wasn't the first queen to ask this. Consort gestured at the map.
Take this, for example. Our beloved queen, whose beauty sets the hearts of our kind aflame the fourth, had our best artisans tan this leather. Our most prestigious painters decorated it, working in tandem with our oldest explorers. But the magic...
He raised a hoof above the land of beasts half lion and half eagle. The ink figure skittered out of his shadow.
The magic is all hers. The map was exquisite by itself, but it was your mother who brought it to life. May she rest among the stars, for she was truly gifted.
Consort retracted his hoof.
In fact,
He continued,
this very forest was planted by your mother's namesake, our beloved queen whose beauty sets the hearts of our kind aflame the first. All of this started with a single seed.
He looked down at the forest.
Alas,
He went on,
I was not in service of the crown then. I know this much. 13 generations of our beloved queens passed between her and your mother. All their creations have been toppled, destroyed, replaced, or remade. Yet the Forest of Giants stands today. Such is its beauty.
The figures danced on the map and forests swayed in invisible winds. 13 generations, I muttered, and nothing remains. Closing my eyes, I tried to find memories of their works. My thoughts were blurred and half-faded. They were lost, even to me. As I looked at the map, something caught my attention. Far to the north of the lands of our kind, past a mountain range labeled the Wall of Life, was a land called the Kingdom of Death. Dread overcame me, but I could not tell why. Little equine things bowed before a bigger equine thing. The big one, she looked like me, but she was bloated, fleshy, wet and thick. Her body was covered in hair and plumage, and she wore a simple tiara. Even the youngest of our kind could create something 100-fold more elaborate. Consort leaned over the map as well.
Once again, you defy expectations. I had never served one of our beloved queens that took an interest in the Kingdom of Death.
I looked up at him. It gives me shivers. Why? Consort raised his head, looking to the northern horizon.
Beyond the Wall of Life, death reigns. There live beings who look like our kind, but they count their lives in decades. An immortal being rules over them, and she is revered as a god. It is a strange land.
A tide of memories flooded my mind. None of them good. The queens, they were all afraid.
In her final year,
Said Consort,
Our beloved queen, whose beauty sets the hearts of our kind aflame the first, led an army against the kingdom of death. Equestrians, those living there call themselves. Their lives are short, but their magic is immense. They draw their strength from the bonds they share. Indeed, such is their devotion that if we were to harness their magic, our kind might feed on it for 100 generations.
For 100 generations, I muttered, we would need no change. Perfection. Consort shrugged.
An illusion of it.
What happened to the army?
No one survived.
Consort said.
Her ashes were sent back in a box. That is when Cenotaph, City of Empty Graves, was built. Death is the equestrian's life. It is the driving force behind their nature and an integral part of their culture. Our kind was put on this earth to create, not to pillage. That is why, if you are thinking of going there, I must strongly advise against it.
His words fell on deaf ears, however. I would succeed where my predecessor had failed. Equestria would be mine. I would be remembered. For my second birthday, I had the Forest of Giants pulled out by the roots. In its place, my kind planted the Field of Roses. I tore myself a rose, inspecting its intricate design. This rose was born for me, its beauty engineered to make me smile. Now that I tore it from its sustaining soil, it would shrivel and die. For me. My kind never dies. Eternity is our playground. We strive to find perfection. We never end, for we are infinite. The oldest of us remembers the earliest of days. The spire was there. The queens were exempt, and for that we were revered. The rest of my kind had an eternity to spend. I had 20 years. On the first day of my 20th year, I would provide an egg to ensure our lineage continues unbroken. When the sun set on the last day of my 20th year, I would die. As my soul ascends, my daughter hatches to continue the cycle.
Our beloved queen,
Consort said,
I must insist that you pay attention.
As a gesture of our familiarity, Consort added friend to his long list of titles, right between mentor and servant. Not that I ever bothered with his full name. I eased my grip on the rose, and a summer gust carried it away. Looking down, one rose stood out from the rest, for it looked off color and faded. The garden was imperfect. It would have to be remade. Consort threw a heavy book before me, trampling the faded rose.
With all due respect, our beloved queen, I am wasting your time.
I have 18 years left, I replied.
And you must devote them to your studies,
Consort said.
You wish to learn equestrian. I will teach you, but you must pay attention. Now, I was just telling you about their irregular verbs.
I looked to the north. Why is it that no queen has ever learned their language?
Learning an alien tongue takes a long time,
Consort replied.
Something which you do not have.
My predecessor sent her army against Equestria wholly ignorant of their culture. I wouldn't make that mistake. I apologize, I said, turning to Consort. Please, continue. A mansion with an open terrace towered in the Plaza of Waterfalls. The pleasant breeze of the Cascades caressed my mane as I enjoyed an equestrian book. Consort could only scour 3 books written in the pony language in the lands of our kind. The library was incomplete after all. A shadow passed over me. The sun silhouetted a feathered creature. As it descended, I saw that it was no bird, but a winged pony. Pegasi they called themselves, if memory served. How did he get here? Outsiders may not visit the lands of our kind, for they are not worthy. As the black Pegasus touched down, I took a cautious step back. Memories surged in my mind, but I found no example of such an unexplained arrival. My servants weren't with me, for I preferred not to be disturbed while practicing the alien tongue. The Pegasus dropped a bag which seemed as big as him. Words. What are the words? Who are you? I asked in his language. The Pegasus bowed deep before me, eyes closed. A spark lit up under him, and a green flame consumed his feathers and hair. The fire danced away to reveal a cheeky grin. Consort! I pulled him to his hooves. It's been 2 months. I was so worried.
I was given a task, and I sought to fulfill it.
He gestured at the bag.
I brought as much as I could carry.
I poured the bag out onto the balcony. 12 books, 24, 100. How many were there? Consort chuckled.
Be mindful now. You do not want to damage them.
I plowed through the pile. So many colors, so many different sizes, themes, kinds. It had been a slow, boring afternoon, yet now I felt fresher than ever. The book that eventually held my interest was one with a golden unicorn's head on the cover. I cracked it open, ready to devour every word. Once upon a time, I began reading out loud. I wanted to impress Consort with the progress I've made. And there I went, running into trouble at the first sentence. I held the book out. What's this word mean? Consort peeked over my shoulder. By our difference in height, he had to stand up to do it.
Magical,
He said.
in the magical land of Equestria.
There were 2 regal sisters who ruled together and created harmony for all the land. I put a hoof to my chin. Didn't you say there's only one princess of Equestria? Consort smiled.
Do you recognize the expression, once upon a time?
I shook my head.
It means a long time ago.
Consort explained.
So long ago, in fact, that most ponies cannot remember. If I'm not mistaken, this is a book that talks about a feud between 2 members of the equestrian royal family, 991 years ago. I recall the event in vivid detail. The skies were dark for 4 days. But their kind dies, and their memories are lost. Hence, they write these simplified accounts so that they can remember.
To the west, a tower that pierced the heavens cast its shadow on the mountains. I suppose the Spire of Ancients was built once upon a time, I said. Consort gave the spire a glance.
One might say that.
A new fear gnawed at my thoughts. Aren't you afraid? If you were to die, all your memories, thousands of years, they would be lost forever. Consort rolled his eyes. Was he belittling me?
If I spent the next 100 years writing an autobiography, who would watch over you?
I'm sorry, His eyes went wide, and he put his hooves up in protest.
No, don't be.
Now he interrupted me. The nerve. You will accept my apology. That is an order. He nodded sheepishly. I care about you, Consort. I missed you. If you had not returned... He stepped closer.
Do not imagine such terrible things. I was in no danger. They could not possibly see through my disguise.
Green fires enveloped him, and he emerged a Pegasus.
Our kinds have not crossed paths in generations. They simply cannot remember.
I had always been comfortable in my carapace, for my form was beauty incarnate. The rest of my kind was not as fortunate, so they changed. I could hardly imagine an entire kind that stayed the same forever. For our kind, change came as naturally as breathing, and happened nearly as often. Don't they change at all? I asked.
Not like we do,
Consort said, transforming back.
They are born small and grow for a while. Their proportions undergo a gradual change. Over decades, their skin becomes rugged and wrinkled, and their hair loses luster. Did you know they actually try to stop this change? If it were up to them, they would indeed stay the same for their entire lives. Strange things.
I fished around in the pile of books. Is there one on their biology?
I may have picked up one or two. I don't suggest you delve deeply into that, my beloved queen. You might not finish.
I can read pretty fast, you know. I picked up a book that had a pony skeleton on its cover. Then I stopped, letting it slip from my grasp. What did you say?
Have I said something wrong, my beloved?
Consort paused.
Our beloved queen.
He chuckled nervously.
I must apologize. Forgive me for being so forward, our beloved queen. But you are special.
I looked away, raising a hoof to hide my smile. When it wouldn't disappear, I decided to embrace it. I looked back at Consort with a full-blown grin. No, don't stop. I don't mind at all. Over the following years, Consort had visited Equestria, the kingdom of death, more times than I cared to count. He brought me books, toys, paintings, figurines, anything he could escape with. Sometimes he was gone for but a week. Other times, I did not see him for several months. The one who ran 1,000 days had to stay still for the time being. Between his fangs, he clutched the stalk of a great leaf, saved from the forest of giants, and waved it up and down, gently wafting the air to create a breeze. In the stained glass fortress of Heat Sink Plateau, the sun quickly became unbearable. Through the red glass floor, I could see a plethora of more servants waiting to jump at my word. Without Consort, however, I felt lonely. The book with the golden unicorn lay open before me. Its seams had gone weak and gave out in a spot. I could not help but return, time and again, to the page where the Princess of Equestria banishes her sister. More powerful than the words written were the ones missing. The book spoke of the battle of the two sisters, but fell silent regarding the following millennium. For 1,000 years, the immortal ruler of Equestria was alone. Her loyal subjects, trapped in their pointless cycle of birth and death, could give her little comfort. The princess was forced to live on with no one, no pony, to confide in. Perhaps my short life was a mercy. Please, I said, turning to the one who ran 1,000 days, take on Consort's image. An irradiated green fire washed over him. Consort's eyes looked at me, awaiting approval. Ponies were easy to tell from one another. They came in different shapes and colors, to speak nothing of their 3 breeds. I wondered if a pony could tell our kind apart. Consort was shorter and a few shades brighter than the one who ran 1,000 days, and his eyes were a little farther separated. His fangs were longer, but his horn was stubbier and jagged at a sharper angle. Were such minutiae lost to those not of our kind? I felt guilty looking at him. Change back. He obliged without a word. Thank you. Consort was a whole week late now. He'd have laughed me all the way to the spire had he seen that. Movement downstairs. The swarm of servants parted before the new arrival. I met Consort atop the spiral stairs, greeting him with my embrace.
Now,
he said as I wrapped my legs around him.
At least let me put my things down first.
I released my hold and gave space. You show up on the day, and you expect me not to care, I scoffed. You almost missed it.
Did you imagine I would not be here on your birthday?
He chuckled. He did that a lot.
Do you not know me? Sorry about your birthday, by the way.
Oh, it's only the 8th. Now, what have you brought for me? An immense wall of undyed glass looked out to the plateau. Consort walked up to it and took a large, rectangular, flat sack off his back. The thing had to be as big as him. He unfurled the sack's bindings to reveal a painting. It depicted 6 ponies in a frozen cave, 2 of each kind. Above them, ethereal-looking equines swirled in a haze of blue. The eyes and horn of one unicorn glowed.
Might this cheer you up?
Consort asked, trying the painting on the wall.
We'll need to wedge this in here.
He turned to me.
If you wish for it to be here, that is.
I cocked my head, inspecting the painting. Didn't you bring anything else? Feeling warmer than comfortable, I turned to the one who ran 1,000 days. What are you staring at? Keep fanning.
It was not easy acquiring this piece,
Consort said.
I had to steal it from a museum.
Museum? What's that?
It is a place where they guard old things.
Why would they do that?
Because equestrians are strange creatures,
Consort chortled.
They could not pinpoint its exact age, but they estimated 6 centuries.
It's not even that pretty. I turned to the one who ran 1,000 days. Go downstairs and fetch me Gives Life by Red. See how he can improve this. He nodded, carefully placing the fan on the floor before scurrying downstairs.
The ponies would frown at you for doing that,
Consort said.
To them, this is a priceless relic.
To me, it is ugly as sin, I replied. And they will frown at me for more than this. The tunnels into the northwestern volcanoes are already complete. The forges will be ready within the week.
Have you reviewed my suggestions for Chief of the Forge?
Consort asked. I have indeed, and I have cast them aside, I replied. I've chosen blacker than black that bends anything he touches.
Oh? I had not considered him. By all means, a fine smith.
His words were those of approval, but his tone betrayed apprehension.
I do not recall him making armor.
Do you not approve of my decision? Consort was silent for a moment.
You really are going along with this. Should you not wait until succession is assured?
My last year? Am I to wage war old and frail?
If you were to...
His breath caught, and he looked away.
If you were not to return, that would be a great blow to our kind.
Has that never happened?
A long time ago. The queens had to start over. No memory survived. Not only that, but...
He cast his gaze down.
I could not bear to lose you, my beloved queen.
I lifted his chin. When will your next trip be?
To Equestria?
He blinked.
You have gone too long without my support as it is. A consort spending so much time away from his beloved queen is unprecedented.
I wholeheartedly agree, I said. We've been apart far too much. I should accompany you. He gasped and put a hoof on my chest, pushing me away.
Absolutely not. I refuse to put you in such danger.
I pushed past his hoof, stepping up to him. The ponies are harmless. That's what you keep saying. I have made my decision. Consort clenched his fangs, pleading with eyes in place of words. My first visit to Equestria shall be one of leisure, I said. Next time, an army will follow.